welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Kirsten and today we are doing the Slayerfest readathon, which is a month-long Buffy the Vampire inspired readathon that's being hosted by the Continuing Chronicles, and I'm so excited. I will have her announcement video linked below. It's really good. I do suggest you check it out. To start off the actual readathon, you have to choose your main character that you want to be from the cast of characters from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then we have to go to different points in the actual series that you come across, so like the bronze, and there you have to read a book for each place. You have to do this in order to defeat the big bad. Starting off with Willow, I have to read a witchy book, and for this I am reading Angel Mage by Garth. This is a Lilith retelling, so I could not think of a better book to pair with this. Plus it is my punishment for not finishing my September TBR, and it's the first book I have to read for the month. In this book, Lilith is trying to bring back her lover, and she has enlisted 4 people to help her do this, although unknowingly. It seems like a really interesting read. It was actually recommended to me by the bookseller at Waterstones, so I couldn't not pick it up when I realised it was a Lilith retelling, and this just feels like the perfect fit for Willow's book. And the first stop we need to do is to get to the bronze, and for this I need to read a light or anticipated read. And for those of you that don't know, I am currently doing my reread of the Throne of Glass series, so of course I had to put in the third book, which is Heir of Fire. I'm really excited to read this. It is anticipated because it's a reread. I know I'm going to love it. I know it's going to be a 5 stars. It's also quite a light read because it's something I read for comfort, so it worked really well for this prompt. I knew I was going to read it anyway, so it was about time I put it on an actual TBR for the month. For those of you that don't know what this is about, we are following a character called Selena Sardothian, who is an assassin turned king's champion, and now she's been sent away to another continent to dispatch the royals there, unknowingly sending her into the arms of the Fae. The next stop is Restful Cemetery, and this is to read a short book, and for this I'm going to be reading Monstress Volume 2. This is a graphic novel that I'm really excited to continue reading. It is a horror graphic novel, and there is quite a lot of bodily horror that's depicted throughout this. I do love the art style. I think it's really well done, and that's one of the main things that sells this for me. Plus our main character is kind of possessed by a demon and we don't quite know why, and our characters are trying to escape from some witch nuns, and what witch nuns do is they round up and torture half-breeds for power, eventually killing them. So it's a very brutal world. It is very much depicted throughout this, so please be careful for trigger warnings, but it's one that I've really enjoyed, and like I said, the artwork really does add to it. The next stop is the school library, and that's to read a book that's the oldest on my TBR. I actually did the oldest on my TBR game for the month that I've already chosen, just because to make this a bit easier, otherwise I'm never going to finish the readathons again, which is what happened to me in September. So out of all the books that was already on my TBR, Soul of the Sword is one that's been on there the longest. This is by Julie Kagawa and is the second book in a trilogy, the first one being Shadow of the Fox. This is chock full of Japanese mythology, and in the first one we are following a character called Yumeko, who is a kitsune, so a trickster fox, and she has been entrusted to bring a piece of the dragon scroll to this temple for safekeeping. However, our other main character, a Cage samurai, has been instructed to take the dragon scroll, but our clever little kitsune has enlisted the help of the Cage samurai somewhat unwittingly to bring her safely to the temple under the pretense that he will get the dragon skull because it's safely there, without realizing that she's had it the whole time. I really like it. It is funny in places. I think the mythology is very interesting, and we do pick up this group of characters that kind of make a merry little band as they go along this adventure. The end of the first book was really interesting. I loved it. I don't quite know why I've put off carrying on with the trilogy for so long, but this is on my anticipated reads. It's a 5-star prediction, so fingers crossed this is going to be a good one. The next stop is the mansion, and for this I need to read a new series. Of course I've gone for Malice by Gwyne. This is the start of, I think it's a quartet, it may be more, I'm not quite sure, but this is a series that my sister recommended because she absolutely loves it. She has pre-warned me in that it is a bit slow to begin, but it really picks up pace, and is a series where the last book that just came out, she devoured it in one sitting, and She is someone that takes a very long time to read a book. She's not the sort of person to sit there for hours and read, and the fact that she actually did just intrigues me. All I know that's going on is there is this big war between giants and humans, and my sister has said it's very brutal and it's a very dark read in places, so I'm intrigued. It seems like the right thing for October. We'll give it a try. Then we're at Sunnydale High, and for this I need to read a book with a school setting, and I've picked up Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I believe this is in a school setting. I believe our main character is attending this school and there's murder mystery elements, and I think it's a dark academia themed book. I don't know too much about it because, especially with these mystery type books, if you know too much about the plot, it's just going to give away a lot of the things that happen, and I find them a bit too predictable. So if I go into it not knowing anything, I think it's going to be much better. This is a book I've been wanting to read for October because of the dark academia mystery vibes. I think it's going to be really good. I know it is a trilogy and we have an overarching mystery that our main character is trying to solve, but within each book we also have mini mysteries that she's solving along the way. It seems like an interesting one. As I said, I do believe it is set in a school setting, so I'm excited. I think all of these books, to be fair, I'm excited for. I think October is going to be an amazing reading month, but when I saw the prompt for school setting, I couldn't think of anything better. Plus, it was already on my TBR, so it makes it a lot easier for me. Then we have UC Sunnydale, and for this I have to read a book with my least favourite trope. This was really hard for me because I don't actually have a least favourite trope. I'm pretty much happy to read anything as long as it's done well, and even then sometimes if it's a bit too tropey I still enjoy it because it's a nice break from the higher fantasy that I tend to read sometimes. So instead I've kind of changed the prompt a little bit and gone for a book that I keep putting off. There's just something about it that I'm not as interested in, so I'm kind of putting that as my least favourite trope because there's a reason why I keep putting this off, and I think it's more to do with the writing style. So I don't have a least favourite trope, but I do have a dislike towards jumps in timelines, which I know that this book has. And of course this is The Court of Miracles by Kester. This was actually on my September TBR. It also came up on my TBR game for retelling again this month, so I thought, you know what, I just need to get it read. And then of course when this prompt came up for least favourite trope and I couldn't really think of anything, the only thing I could think of that least favourite was this. And it's not because it's a retelling, because I love retellings. This is a Les Miserables retelling, but again I know it does have that jump in timeline and I'm really not a fan of that in books, so I'm hoping that this is done well and I don't mind it too much, but I guess we'll see. From what I do know about this book, we are following our main character who is trying to save her sister who has been sold off to the House of Flesh. To prevent this from happening, she joins the Thieves Guild so that she doesn't also have to join, and vows to get her sister back because it was their father that sold her sister to the House of Flesh. It seems like an interesting one. It's set in France obviously, and it's a kind of the underbelly of France. We have a court of thieves, a court of assassins, the House of Flesh. We have a lot of things like this. I've heard some mixed reviews, but it is a rather beautiful book. So then we are at the Tower and I have to read a book outside of my comfort zone, and for this I'm going with The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Classics are something I do enjoy. I like to read a classic around Halloween time, but it's definitely outside my comfort zone because I don't tend to read them all the time. I really have to be in the mood for them, and generally that is only once a year around Halloween time where I'll pick up a horror classic. This isn't one I've read before. I'm really intrigued to see the original story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, especially because there's been so many adaptations of this story. I love seeing where they all originated. The same with Frankenstein and Dracula. I find that they're really fascinating to read about, and 9 times out of 10 you actually start feeling sorry for the person that is deemed a monster. So be interesting to see how this goes. Then we have the magic box, and that's to read a book with music in it or a poem, something music orientated. But this is where I am taking in Willow's power, and that is to change this to whatever I want, because quite honestly I don't have any books with music centered around it and I'm not interested in poetry at all, so this was a good one to use Willow's power on. And for this I'm just changing it to a prompt that's already on my own TBR game to read a contemporary, and that's Meat Market by Juno Dawson. This is a book that's looking at the model industry, and from what I've read of Juno Dawson's other works, which is Wonderland, which was an Alice in Wonderland contemporary retelling, I really enjoyed it. It deals with some very heavy topics but in a really good way, and that book was chock full of LBQTIA+ plus representation, as well as trigger warnings throughout the book, so please go into it aware of that. And I do believe Meat Market's very much the same, lots of trigger warnings, but I am hoping it's dealt in that better way that I have found. Like, so I find contemporaries are something that I don't always like to read, but certain ones that are dealing with a hard-hitting topic but in a way that's quite meaningful and well handled are books that I do enjoy, so I'm hoping that this is going to be just as good as Wonderland. Then we have the moment where Willow has gone dark, and for this I need to read a dark or taboo book. Honestly, this one threw me a little bit because I couldn't really think of what's taboo. I was thinking of rereading My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, because this does deal with a taboo subject in that we have a teacher who is in a relationship with our main character who is only 15 years old, and that's a very taboo subject, it's a very dark subject, and it was a really impactful book. I really enjoyed this book, although lots of trigger warnings, so please go into that being aware of that. However, this was a reread and I really wanted to match up some of the books from my October TBR game that I've already got, because as said, I've got a lot. If I get time, I will swap out the prompt book to this because I think it better matches it, but in all honesty, I don't know if I'm going to have time to fit another book into my TBR. So to help with that, I instead chose Good Girls Die First by Kathryn Foxfield. This is following a group of school kids who end up at this abandoned carnival, and I know some really creepy things start to happen. It's supposed to be a YA thriller slash horror. I've heard a couple of people review this book and say that there's too much happening in one go at the end, but it is meant to be a bit more creepy, and honestly, carnival settings, abandoned, it just sounds creepy to me. It really does. So I'm kind of going for the more dark prompt side of this, but I don't know if it's going to fit, but if I make good progress with my TBR and I've got time, then I will actually go with My Dark Vanessa, because I do think this fits the prompt a lot better for being a taboo subject. And then the final prompt is Hellmouth, and that's to read the biggest book on my TBR. So again, I did this from my TBR game, and that ended up being Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and in a way I'm kind of gutted because this is a book I've really been excited to read, and because I've got to read these books in order, this means this is one of the last books I'm going to be reading for the month, which I'm kind of upset about because I loved the first book from Blood and Ash. That was a 5-star read. I thought it was really good. We have a whole vampire war story going on. Our main character Poppy is a maiden, but considering she is someone that is so important to these people, she is treated absolutely terribly, and we're under the illusion that the vampires are the bad characters in this, which you would think is pretty normal, and the Ascended are protecting them, and Poppy is a major part of this. But of course, not everything is as it seems, and it is a dark fantasy romance. And the second book, I have heard nothing but good things yet again. So I'm kind of gutted that it's the last book on the TBR, but it will be a good way to finish the month. So that's all the books for this readathon. I'm super excited to take part. Please let me know if you're taking part in this readathon. I'd love to check out your TBRs. And if you're not taking part in this readathon, are there any readathons you are taking part in? Because again, I'd be interested. I don't think I'm going to do any more readathons than this and my own TBR game, because my TBR is looking massive once again, and I told myself I wouldn't let it get out of hand. I don't know why I do this to myself, but there we go. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. All my social media links to my Instagram, Goodreads and Twitter will be linked below, and I'll catch you in the next video.